Welcome to the Great Path Podcast panel. As always, I'm your host, Tony B. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what the Great Path is, why I started it, where it's currently at, and kind of podcasting in general, and really what it means to step out of your comfort zone and really kind of seize on something that you've always wanted to do. So who am I? I'm Tony B. So I wear a lot of hats. I used to run a crafting company back in the day, TB Fantasy Crafts, for anyone who's familiar with Sci-Fi Valley Con. I've been here a lot. I run Saber School. Any of you guys have come down to our booth. I own a adjusting company. I do a lot of things. Single dad. But one thing that's kind of always carried me through my life is I've always had a strange passion for helping people. I call it projects. The worse off someone is, the more drawn I am to the situation. So, for anyone who's spent more than 5 minutes talking to me, I'm a gigantic nerd. I'm a huge geek. I'm a geek about a lot of things. Primarily, I'm a geek about Star Wars, and that's actually how I came up with the name The Great Path. The whole point of it is, in Star Wars, you've got your Jedi, you've got your Sith, you've got your light side and your dark side. And to those who, I don't want to say are closed-minded, they kind of look at it as the dichotomy between good and evil. That never made sense to me. I think the world is shades of gray. I think the world is what happens between the lines. And that's where I first came up with the name The Great Path, is I've always fancied myself a great Jedi. And I started listening to this podcast called The Positive Side with a guy named Jeremy Todd. And I've been listening to, it was the first podcast I ever listened to, and didn't know much about podcasting. This was actually less than a year ago. And I was listening to it, and I really digged what his message was, and I realized this is something I can do. I have a voice, I have a message, and I have a weird desire to help people. So on a whim, not expecting anything, I sent him an email, and I never imagined in a million years I was going to get a response. Surprisingly, I did. Started talking to him, and I ended up hiring him as my personal coach. And together we started this journey that about 3 months later culminated in the Great Path podcast. And it's been a very interesting ride, to put it mildly. It's a way for me to help people that I may never even meet. And I get to talk about things that sometimes are difficult to talk about. Anyone who's listened to my podcast, the most popular episode to date is actually on depression and suicide. And it's heavy topics, but it's topics that need to be talked about. And I wanted to talk about them in a way that people outside of the mainstream would understand. For all of us, anyone who's at this panel, we're the uber geeks. We're the people that love fantastical worlds. We're the people that find comfort in the realms of fancy. And sometimes when you get into that kind of stuff, it's hard to connect with lessons that are out there. I mean, obviously we've all heard of Tony Robbins and SelfHelp and stuff like that. And if you're someone like me, I'm a very proud person. I'm a very self-starter. I was very hesitant to go the whole route of self-help because a lot of their message is bullshit. Let's just call it what it is. It's a lot of pre-packaged nonsense, and they're trying to sell something, and they're trying to get you to buy things, and there's a lack of authenticity. But if you dig through the billion-dollar industry, there's some really good lessons there, and I started to realize there's lessons in everything I enjoy. There's lessons in Star Wars, there's lessons in Game of Thrones, there's lessons in Disney Pixar movies. And I realized that that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about finding these lessons in these realms that we all decide to go to. So, part of my drive, if you will, I don't want to call it inspire, but part of my drive to help people really comes down to, I didn't have anybody as a kid. I never had anyone to inspire me. I never had anyone to mentor me, and it sucked. My whole childhood was rough. I'm a child of divorce. I have a sister, but I was basically an only child my whole life. And it was, I'm not looking for a pity party or anything, but it was a little rough. My dad got multiple sclerosis in 1999, which would have made me 15 years old. And my childhood basically ended at that point. I went from child to homeless caregiver. And it was rough. And what did I do to escape? I dove into fantasy fiction. There's an author, R.A. Salvatore. He was the first foray into reading fantasy, and I just got absorbed. I hadn't yet really discovered Star Wars. I wasn't really into that, but I was incessantly bullied. I mean, it was bad. When we got evicted from our house, we didn't have any money. I was only allowed to shower once every 2 weeks. I had a hygiene issue. It was bad. And didn't have any friends, didn't have anything, and I realized as I've grown older that my desire to help people is, in a way, I'm speaking to who I call young Tony. So anyone here who's ever developed a podcast or wants to develop a podcast, one of the big questions you need to ask yourself is, who is your audience? Who are you speaking to? Without a shadow of a doubt, from the moment I came up with the concept of this podcast, I knew that I was speaking to young Tony. I was gonna be the person that I needed when I needed it. And that's what kind of started it. And life has been ups and downs. I am no longer married. I've been divorced now for about 2 years, but I was married to my best friend. Absolute love of my life, best friend. And we were together for 7.5 years, and one day it just kind of ended. And when I say just kind of ended, I came home from a real great experience, super happy, and the whole goddamn thing fell apart like house of cards. And from it, so anyone who's come by my booth, my son's there, Traylon. His mother just decided she didn't want to be a mom anymore, I guess. So I now am a single dad on my own, trying to be everything that I never thought I could be. And it's difficult. Regularly, I struggle with depression. I struggle, If anyone's kind of spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to the suicide episode, we kind of talk candidly about it. Suicidal thoughts, I think we all have them. I'm not capable of actually doing them. I think it's natural to have those kind of thoughts. And I think a lot of people suffer in silence, and we don't want to do that. So Bethany was on my suicide episode. So was JJ, the gentleman at my table. And we kind of got real and kind of tried to explain to people what it's like. Because we all, especially those of us here who are the super geeks, the nerds, the people who are not ashamed to dress up in cosplay, to fucking wear, ironic t-shirts, who run around with little glow sticks and fight each other in the middle of a convention, we get a lot of shit. We get a lot of shit, and it's hard to, it's sometimes hard to connect with the world. And my message is simple. It's, you're not alone. You're not. Look at this room. We're not sitting here by ourselves. Look at this convention. It's sometimes really easy to get lost inside of your own mind, especially during dark periods, especially when that pressure of the world just weighs on you. I mean, there's times, so I make my dollars and cents through an adjusting company. And last year, what is it, 2021 now? So at the end of 2020, I went from making damn good money to losing my largest client just like that. And I didn't tell anybody, because Tony's successful. So I sat there, and I can't count how many nights I cried, thinking, it's fucking house cards, it's all falling apart. I don't know how I'm gonna pay my bills. And it was rough, but even through all of that, it was just trying to find ways to take the stress that life gives you. And so my coach, Jeremy Todd, explained something to me. And it was like a meme he saw. And it was, you have failures. So we'll call them failures or stressors or whatever. And there was like a picture. And you got two people, and they both have their stressors, they both have their problems. And one guy is taking all these failures, and he's putting the book on the ground. And the next guy, he's putting it on his head. And as these failures continue, one is getting crushed, and one is climbing higher. And that's what I realized, that in a lot of ways, this podcast allows me to take my failures, my struggles, and they become a staircase for my ascension. And I want to get that message out to people, because I think so many people have so much more to offer than they know that they have. And I'm trying to show you that the lessons are there. They're everywhere. They're in all the stuff you read, all the stuff you watch. You just have to sometimes open your eyes, accept the fact that there's maybe things about you you don't like. Who cares? One of the things I tell anyone who works with me is, before you can grow, before you can get where you want to go, you have to accept who you are. Maybe you're overweight. Maybe you're tall, you're short. Maybe you're not as intelligent as you want. Maybe you have an anger issue. There are always ways you can improve yourself, but there are always the constants, the things that are who you are. And if you can't take the time to do the introspection and accept who you are and love who you are, how can you ever expect to engage with the world the way you want to? So, with all of this going on in my head and reaching out to Jeremy and, doing this weird thing, because again, proud guy, a big self-starter, the entire concept of hiring a coach to me seemed completely outlandish. Like, fuck all that. I'm my own man. I don't need this. But it's weird. It was like an accelerator. Honestly, half of our sessions were just me talking. But by having a sounding board, by doing this work and hearing what he was saying, it all started to come together. And this idea came. Is it possible to put my message out there? And what if something happens? What if it gets bigger? What if people actually listen to it? That's the most, okay, I'm a very open guy. I have 285 downloads as of this morning, and I know that doesn't sound like much of anything, but I'm fucking walking on cloud nine. Because less than 90 days ago, guys, this thing was nothing more than a thought. If there's anything you take from this meeting here, I want you to take this. Having a thought is fantastic, but the thought without the action is pointless. I think everyone here's heard of The Secret or whatever. I don't know, I never read it. But it's the whole concept of manifesting. You think about something and you create it in the world. That's like half the work. That's a great idea, but it requires the action. You have to act. You hate where you are in your life? Fucking do something about it. Maybe you can't do a monumental change. We're not all in a situation where I hate my job, I'm just gonna quit it tomorrow. But there's steps you can take. Maybe you pick up, maybe, you like something. You think about, is there a way to monetize that? Is there a way to change my circumstance and turn it into something better? Maybe you're unhappy with your fitness level. Well, guess what? It takes nothing to walk an extra 100 steps a day. Or take, yeah, I see you over there. I guess my point is, you have to add action to thought. If I would have sat there and thought to myself, oh, it'd be really cool to have a podcast, but never fucking did anything about it, it wouldn't be here. And 285 downloads, that's nothing, that's dog shit. I had a buddy, they just posted on their Facebook, they got 50,000 downloads on there. And I was like, fantastic guys, I couldn't be more proud of you. I'm just as proud of them as I am proud of me, and it's just going to grow. And even if 285 is the most I can get, that's like me standing in a room with 285 people and they're hearing my message. And that is profound. And this is far from done, far from done. I've got, for anyone who's actually listened to the show, I've got all kinds of episodes coming up. I'm always up for new ideas, new things. Actually just got an idea yesterday from talking to someone. I'm gonna do an episode on Bucky Barnes and victim shaming. Because I'm gonna talk about how the movies have shown Bucky going around and apologizing for everything he did when he got brainwashed as the Winter Soldier. And if that's not a critique of our society, I'm actually hoping to get a female on for the episode because I think there's a direct correlation between the female experience in America right now and that. How many times do people have to apologize, females have to apologize for things that are completely outside of their control? So, lessons, they're out there, they're everywhere, and it's all about action. I don't know, I know Lance. I know of Annalisa, but I don't really know her. And I don't know you guys at all, other than the quick conversation we had, but I'm sure that each and every one of you, you all have things that you want to do, whatever those things are. My advice to you is put a plan on paper and put it into action. If you did one tiny little thing every day, where would you be in 30 days? You'd be 30 little things farther than you are right now. And it doesn't have to be big monumental shifts. I grew up from the depths of poverty to where I'm at now, and it wasn't big, it wasn't anything handed to me, it was nothing. It was keeping your eye on the prize, and every day, even if it's just thinking about it, doing something to make your dream a reality. I don't know anyone's religious background, I don't particularly care, but the one thing we all know for certain is this life that we have right now, that's the only one we know for certain we have. So what is the point of wasting it? do the big, I mean, who knows? I send an email to, there's an episode I really want to do, and it's from, I don't know if you guys have seen, there's an artist, he's from South Africa called The Kifness. Look him up on Facebook, he's amazing. He does these like music things where he takes like clips of like animals making sounds and he'll live mix a song. It's fantastic. I've sent him, 2 emails now and like 3 Facebook messages. I want to get him on my show to do an episode about creativity. This dude's got like 4 million followers. He's not gonna answer to me, but you know what? If I keep messaging him, who knows? It doesn't matter how big your dream is. It doesn't matter how small your dream is. The only thing that matters is that you're doing something about it. And understand at the end of the day, the only fucking person you are competing against is the you from yesterday. So Lance and I were martial artists. Annalise is a boxer. And I think I told you this once before when we were training. Don't compare yourself to me. I don't compare myself to Lance. Lance and I did our knock move. It's a level 1 fighter test. Fucking hard. Lance is at a different skill level than I'm at. I'm at a different skill level than Lance. He can do things that I can't do. The worst thing I could do is compare myself to Lance. The worst thing he could do is compare myself to me. As we went through this grueling training, the only person we were competing against was the person the day before. Because that's what it matters. I mean, one of the things I talk about, I did an episode on Bing Bong from Inside Out, which is the only episode, mind you, I've never listened to. I've listened to all my episodes. That one's a little too personal for me. I can't listen to it. But the one thing I talk about is measuring progress by any means necessary. It doesn't matter if life is crushing you, and it's hard. If you're going through depression, if you're going through a hard time, it's really fucking hard to be like, oh, well, I've got this 14-step plan that I'm going to do. No, sometimes when the world is crushing you down, it's just a matter of staring at your feet and looking at one little quarter of an inch at a time. Because though it doesn't look like much, if you went 100 days walking a quarter of an inch at a time, if you turned around at the end of those 100 days, you're now farther than when you were the day before. And that's a choice. You could take the quarter inch, or you could sit there and bitch. Well, it's only a quarter inch, it's nothing. Look at where that person who complained is, look at where you are. It's all about gauging your progress. I actually just, I met this really sweet old lady. I was down in Baltimore doing work, and she had like a water loss. I walked in to look at some water damage in her kitchen, and I knew within 2 minutes of walking into this lady's house that it wasn't covered, because I'm an insurance adjuster. This wasn't gonna be covered. This was a big problem. She had mold growth, all kinds of stuff. She goes on to tell me that her husband of like 60 years had died like 6 months ago, and she just gave up. She knew about it, she was super apologetic, she just gave up. And I couldn't help myself. I should have just kept my mouth shut, because you don't want to, should have kept my mouth shut, couldn't help myself. I stood there for almost an hour and talked with her, and I gave her the same thing I just told you guys. That like, I tried to explain to her, I'm like, it sucks, it's never gonna stop sucking. My dad died in 2010. It is 2021, and I'm still not over it. It's gonna suck my whole fucking life. But you know what? Life goes on. It's always gonna suck. I think one of the big problems a lot of people have is they think that these traumas that we carry around with us, somehow they're just gonna magically go away. They're not. They're part of who we are. That doesn't have to be a bad thing. And I explained to her, I'm like, sometimes it's the little things. It's gauging that one step at a time. And I told her the same thing I tell everybody when I talk about that, which is just think of Finding Nemo. What does Dory say? Just keep swimming. That's all this is. Whether you're training for a martial art, whether you're training for a job, whether you're trying to learn how to draw, or you're trying to learn how to sing, or hell, you're just trying to do a pull-up. Just keep swimming. The future is bright, guys. I know we live in some dark, horribly divided times, but the future's bright. It's your perspective shapes your reality. You have a choice every time you run into an issue. You have a choice. You can choose how to view it. You can view it in a self-defeating mindset, or you can view it as an opportunity to be better. And I guess I'm just here to tell you that I'm in all of your corners. You guys can do whatever you want to do if you have the strength and the courage to accept who you are and to just keep swimming. So that's what I got for you guys. I'm going to open this up to some Q&A. Any questions you guys might have about starting podcasts, anything about me, if you have some fandoms you want to talk about, what do you got?
What is your favorite podcast episode that you've done so far?
That is a tough one. is a tough one. Favorite is the one I enjoy the most, or one I think has done what?
One you enjoy the most.
The one that I enjoy the most. Boy, that is a tough one. They all have so a little behind the scenes. In a lot of ways, my podcast is basically self-therapy. I trained myself for years because I'm like a DM in Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. I can spew without thinking. So that's why I listen to my episodes, because I tend to inspire myself because I don't know what I'm going to say until it comes out. So they've all had a really good message. Probably I want to say I did an episode, and I highly doubt anyone in here knows the fandom, but I did an episode on a character from Dragonlance named Caramon Majir. And the episode was Caramon Majir and the importance of purpose. And what it talks about is, so Caramon was this big, strapping, buff dude. And without retelling the entire episode, long story short, he had a twin brother who was frail and weak and treated him terribly. And Caramon always had, he was nice, he was kind of a simpleton, but he was a nice guy, he always had his purpose, which was he was the protector of his brother. His brother was weak and frail. Well, throughout the series of Dragonlance, that dynamic changes. Raceland, his brother, gains immense magical power. And actually, at the end of the original trilogy, he saves Caramon. There's actually a scene where he props up Caramon and helps walk him. And that shattered his world. His entire purpose in life was protecting his brother. When his brother got strong enough to protect himself, Caramon let himself go. When the follow-up trilogy comes out, when they reintroduce Caramon, he is this fat, drunken fucking slob because he has lost his purpose in life. And I thought that was such a profound lesson. I mean, I don't know any of you, but I can tell you for me, the moment I lose my purpose, I am adrift. And it's a terrible place for me. I'm a huge list maker. Anyone who's ever been in my house, I got lists upon lists. I got sub-lists that reference other lists. Because one, it's a great way of measuring progress. There's a fun tip. If you ever want to measure progress, make a fucking bullet point list. I don't even care what you put on it. I literally have lists that say finish work list, which reference my work list. And some of it's just turn on the computer. Sometimes that's what I have to do so I can scratch that fucker off so I can get the motivation to go on to the next one. And as you do it, you start with these stupid little things okay, I need to process the new claims. I fucking hate doing that. All right, process the new claims. Then the next one, some sort of easy file. It's got to call and issue a denial. Done. Then it's this one I've been dreading. It's fucking contents claim or some bullshit that's gonna just sap up my day. But I build the momentum by doing little things. I mean, I literally have done things put trailing on the bus. Done. I gotta do that shit anyway. But I'm a big list taker. So the great part about that episode, why I love it so much, is I have found myself repeatedly. Martial arts is a great example. When I lose what I'm working for, Lance and I have talked, I don't even know how many times, how we wish we could go back and do our knock movie again. It was fucking terrible. I mean, it was amazing, but it was fucking terrible. It was 5 months out of our life? And we didn't have any assist. I mean, I'm throwing this out in the world there. We're a little bitter about it. We were left to train on our own. And we were like, you know what? At first we got a little upset about it, and then we were like, fuck it, we're gonna do this our way. By the end of it, and you'll appreciate this, we were doing multiple 10-minute rounds on the pads. Full power, 10 minutes straight without stopping, take a 2 or 3 minute break, go and do it again. For anyone who's never trained, that's insanity. I couldn't do a 3-minute round right now. I'd gas out. Guarantee I could gas out right now. We didn't walk onto the mat one day and we're like, we're gonna do a 10-minute round, because we would have died. We started with 5 1-minute rounds, then 5 2-minute rounds, then 3 7-minute rounds. And we got up and we worked up. Usually we had a purpose. But you know what? As soon as we got that fucking documentary, it was like, what now? So that whole episode that I'm mentioning, that's what it talks about. It talks about, for me particularly, just the kind of human I am, I have to have a purpose. If I don't have a purpose, it's a dangerous place for me, because I get set adrift and I lose desire. And then all those dark, sad thoughts start creeping into your brain. I mean, I think anyone who talks to me knows, I've never been diagnosed with ADD, but I definitely have ADD. I can't focus on one thing to save my life, but I can do 5 things fantastically. And that's what I tell everybody, you know, so much labeling these days, I'm not trying to make it any political, but so much labeling, so much negativity, you know, the doctors have tried to get my son on medication, and I'm like, screw you. But he has a hard time focusing. Yeah, well, I'm going to train him to focus on 5 things if he can't focus on one thing. Because I really think that it's about perspective, guys. It's about taking whatever quirks you have and making them your strengths and making the things that make you unique. Why is everybody trying to be all the same? I don't understand. But yeah, so that's probably my favorite episode personally. Next.
For anyone interested in self-help, where would you direct them to get
So, okay, so a couple of books that I've read that I think are fantastic, and this is a combination of read and or listened because I drive a lot for my job. I read this book called You Are a Badass, which I cannot recommend enough. It's actually really fucking good. A little bit of a slow read at first, but it's really nice because it kind of talks about that stuff. It kind of talks about isolating the things about you that make you unique, if you will, and understanding you are a fucking badass once you figure out what it is that you're a badass about. Every single one of us are good at something. Something. I don't know what the fuck it is. Maybe you don't know what it is. Find out what it is. Experience the world. So that's a really good one. I also just listened to The Compound Effect, which was really cool. So it kind of takes that notion of little steps and it builds it into a system where he basically talks about, and he ties it into like weight loss, he ties it into like finances, stuff like that. But it's those tiny little changes. The whole concept of the book is don't focus on big monumental shifts, focus on small manageable pieces. I mean, what's the old adage, how do you eat a horse? One bite at a time. And I realize a lot of what he talks about is stuff I've always thought about in my real life. I mean, how many times have we all been paralyzed when we think of something, when we do what I call zooming out? We zoom out and we realize everything we have to do, whether it's, grading 500 billion, Lance is a professor, whether it's grading all of his, like all the papers, or for me, a storm comes in and I have 38 claims that hit my desk and I go, oh my fucking God. Like I got 40 hours of work to do in 12 hours to do it. It's easy to get paralyzed. And so the compound effect kind of talks about how avoid the urge to zoom out and instead zoom in onto something you can handle. So that's a really good one. I read The Subtle Art to Not Giving a Fuck. It didn't resonate as much with me. Yeah, it was a really cool title, that's why I bought it. It got a lot better towards the end. Like the first 2/3 of the book could have just been taken out. So those are some really good ones. Not to plug my friend, but yeah, my friend runs the Positive Side podcast. That's a really good one. He's got a huge backlog. He's got like 600 or 700 episodes. That's a great one. He's got some episodes that are super short, some that are longer. If you just want to pick me up, I tend to listen to him in the morning. I did get this book. I was introduced to the guy because he was on one of Jeremy's episodes. He wrote Game Changer Mindset. And, it's called Unstoppable is the name of the book, and it talks about the game changer mindset. He's a little more business related, but it was a really interesting notion. I tried getting into his book. His interview was fantastic. I just had a hard time getting into the actual pages of it. Another good podcast, if you want to listen to it, I just had him on my show 2 weeks ago, is Spiritual Dope with Brandon Hanley. So he's a really interesting guy. He kind of tackles spirituality from a non-religious aspect. I actually highly encourage you guys. So I did a 2-part episode on the Force. The first one was with a gentleman from the Mental Mastery Alliance, Adam Walton. We talked about the living force. So we talked about living in the moment, trusting your instincts, kind of that more zoom in approach. And then with Brandon Hanley, we did an episode on the unifying force, which was, I guess, more of the draw outward. And we talked about source energy, interconnectivity, how concepts of like shared consciousness, stuff like that. Really good episode if you're interested in that kind of stuff. Those are 2 really good podcasts I suggest if you like the whole self-help genre. Honestly, it just kind of starts with opening. You kind of just find something. Like I said, up until not even last year, I never listened to a podcast. And then I don't even know how I stumbled upon. I think I stumbled on one because I was trying to get motivated. And stumbled on a few, and then I stumbled on Jeremy's, and I was like, dig this guy's message. He has a lot of really good guests. So, next.
I have so many questions, but
Good. Boom.
I
Rapid
have
fire.
time like wording them. So.
That's okay. Word salad.
We started gaming as adults, basically. Like myself, I just wasn't encouraged anything that was like boy stuff, and that was considered like boy stuff. So I started only gaming as an adult. We started using Cortex system, which was like it's out of print now and everything. So now we're back into it and we're trying out D&D. Like there's only 2 of us that have been playing it for a while. The rest are complete noobs. But we started thinking about like exploring like actual issues and things like that, putting them into your own character and kind of role playing it out and exploring it that way and getting other people's feedback and everything on real issues. So we have this like balance of like, is it uncomfortable? Do people just want to play and escape it, or do we want to do this? So it's a nice balance. So it's been a very nice balance. And then I learned about that there are a lot of places starting to do use gaming as a therapy for kids and for like socialization. And I work with kids, mostly little ones, little toddlers and everything, but I've been in this field for 22 years, so I'm very interested in this, but don't have the gaming background to actually use it to teach them. But I thought it was an interesting thing, and I didn't know if you ever use that in your podcast, like as far as interviewing or consulting with somebody who does this.
So, let me bring that up. So yes, I have an episode. So if you guys are here at the con, Sentinels Keep, if you know where I'm at, they're at the end of the hall. They're the guys running all the D&D rooms. So I'm really good friends with them. And I actually did an episode with Lou, one of their founders, where we talked about how role-playing, specifically Dungeons and Dragons, helped him discover his voice. He was a very antisocial person, had a hard time talking to people, had a hard time connecting with the world. But by playing tabletop, he discovered his voice. He now can talk to anybody about anything. And I've also got another member from Sentinels Keep. We've got this in the pipeline. It should hopefully be coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be doing an episode. He's a veteran on PTSD and how tabletop has actually been kind of a good treatment for him to deal with that. In the episode where I interviewed Lou and we talked about finding your voice, we actually talk about how I personally, so I run a Starfighter game, which is like D&D. It's just more like sci-fi fantasy. I'm really known amongst my group of really elaborate, in-depth storylines where I like to bring in, because I have a degree in philosophy, so I like to bring in moral and ethical dilemmas. But I've also learned that you can tackle things such as racism in the game. One, if you have a smart DM who knows how to frame it, but you can actually tackle these complex issues in-game because it's like just removed enough from reality that people get comfortable with ideas that they themselves maybe wouldn't be. And I think a lot of that kind of comes down to, we're kind of, and again, I don't want to turn political, but a recent administration really kind of brought a lot of casual racism to the forefront. And people who grew up casually racist, most likely because their family was casually racist. I'm sure there was a triggering factor at some point in time that started it, but a lot of this is conditioning. So people get these knee-jerk reactions, casual racism being one of them. And it's really hard to get anybody to have an open mind when it's a knee-jerk reaction. But if you put them in a world where everything is fake, where we're just playing, we're role-playing, guys, I'm just playing a character, you would be surprised if you have a good DM who can control it, you can get people to explore complex issues. I mean, one of the things we talk about in that episode is I've actually been able to have discussions about abortion, like real big hot button issues in game. Sometimes it's just by, you don't come out and say abortion, you find little layers to talk about these complex issues, but once you put them in game and people are playing their characters and embodying their characters, people tend to have a little more open mind. I don't know if it's a different area of the brain that's being accessed when you're pretending to be someone else, but it's incredibly useful. You're absolutely right. Role-playing therapy is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger as a way to treat attention deficit, as a way to treat. There's actually one of the, I don't think she's here this weekend, one of the girls from Sentinels Keep, she's, I think she's autistic, but she runs a game for people who are, I don't know the political term, the politically correct term is like sensory, yeah. She runs a game specifically for them because she herself suffers from that. And it's been fantastic at getting them to socialize and getting them to be able to connect to the world. And anyone who has, I've been trying to get Lance into my game for years. He's never role played. It's amazing what you can learn. I mean, you just got to get over yourself. That's the big part. Is a lot of people are like, oh, it's so dorky. Or people who never play, they ask, well, what's D&D? Well, it's a collective hallucination with dice. There it is. That's the best way I can describe it. But it's a great way to explore not only other viewpoints, it's a great way to explore yourself, great way to explore anything. If you've got issues with your sexuality, it's a great way to explore it. If you've got issues with your gender, it's a great way to explore it. Because you literally get to pretend to be something else. It's empowering. Hope that helps.
So, yeah, so I've tried it with the kids a little bit with like the system that even though it's outdated, the kids don't know anything. So I can just make stuff up and be like, no, this is the rule now.
Yep.
They don't know, they just go along with it. And it has, not only they've explored real life issues without me even telling them to kind of put that in there, you can tell that they're putting it in there. It has made a huge difference to when they're just in a free play mode, learning to just being very confident, going up to each other and talking about real things or asking about each other.
Communication just in general. So one of the big issues I have with my son is getting him to communicate. Yep,
It's just been amazing. So do you get any negativity or judgment for the things that you talk about, your opinions and your perspectives on your podcast? Because I know, like, even whenever the most politically correct
Person in the world, yeah.
people talking about this will still have somebody that's judging and saying,
Yes.
no, you shouldn't do this, that, and the other.
Yes. And so anyone who knows me, I've always been the guy who marches to the beat of my own drum. I think it's pretty much just I went from caring what people thought to not caring what people thought. It was like a transition. But yeah, I've gotten that. And to be honest, I appreciate all feedback that I get, but I also know what my message is, and I know that. So one of the things I didn't do, so this is kind of sorry, I'm stumbling here. This is one of those things that if you talk to a lot of people and they say how to start a podcast, one of the things they'll say is be controversial, take a stance. I don't do that. I think it's bullshit. Yeah, I get it because we're so divided as a people. If you are controversial, it's an easy way to get listens. I don't go that route. But you're always going to have the trolls. Okay, you're always going to have people that are going to have a problem with whatever it is you're doing. And again, what did we talk about earlier? It's about perspective. You can let that negativity into your world, and you can let it corrupt something you care about. Or you can hear it, shuck it off, go on with your day. So yes, I do get that, and I literally just smile, nod, move on. I have people in my life that don't understand the importance of my podcast. This means a lot to me. And if all it ever leads to is what it has led to now, I'm okay with that. There's always going to be people that can find a problem with something, and in my opinion, you just have to refuse to let it into your world. Because if you let the negativity in, it's like rot on wood. It's just going to spread. So, I mean, and I guess let me finalize that by just saying, you're never going to please anyone, so don't try. Like, you're never going to please everyone, so don't bother trying. Make sure that you're staying true to yourself. So if you want to talk about a tough topic, I got a whole bunch of shit about one of the guests I brought on. A whole bunch of shit. I don't care. Got the message across. I knew what I was digging for. A lot of what I do is digging through shit for nuggets of gold. But I'm cool with that because those nuggets of gold are worth it. Next.
How did you expand your podcast? Like, how did you network with people, or did you just?
So I networked. So the cool thing about once you get into the podcasting world is it's like a community, and most podcasters are super helpful in going on other podcasts or having you on. I went on Jeremy's podcast, which was an awesome experience. I'm gonna go a bit of a side tangent here. So we talk about, we haven't talked about how many of you, and you don't have to tell me, but how many of you have always like wanted to do something? Like, think of one thing in your head right now that you're like, I'm gonna do that. Now, how many of you have actually done it? How did you do it? Did it just happen? Or did you make a plan and it just, you worked towards it?
I kind of got forced into my plan, but I made it happen.
Good.
I plan to make a store and came up with a major plan of putting everything together. So now I have
Boom. Exactly. So one of my little ideas. Sorry about that. I'm not sure if someone's getting eaten in the hallway or what's happening there, but so one of my things is when I was sitting there driving, listening to the positive side, but I'm gonna go ahead and close this door because someone's getting ate alive, and well, that's rather comical. Hold on, let me put this down real quick.
That's a supernatural podcast. the panel on me.
Sorry about that. That was really hard to focus. So one of the ideas I had when I was sitting there listening to the positive side in my car, my son listens with it to me because I have him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I told myself, you know what? One day he's going to hear my voice out of that fucking speaker. And it happened. It took a while, took a couple months, and I got to go on a show. And it, like, to hear Traylon's excitement when he heard my voice come through that speaker was worth billions of dollars to me. The point being, to come back to your original question, the podcast community, they're really like a family because it's relatively new. I mean, podcasts have been around for a while, but the growing art form is still pretty young. It's still kind of in its infancy stage. So when you start getting out there and sending emails and reaching out to people, you'd be surprised how quickly people want to help. So a lot of it's just kind of networking. You know, I drew a lot on the people in my close circle. One day Lance will get on. We've already got an idea for an episode, but like I drew upon my friends Jeremy, my friends JJ, Bethany. I had my friend Jess come on. For me, the way my podcast is, it's all about, do you have something to say? Because when I do guest episodes, it's mostly I'm just kind of a moderator. I'll just listen and I let them talk and I'll chime in when it works and I'll be a soundboard. And it's just, you know, not being afraid to go out there. I've spent a little bit on Facebook, just kind of like running ads and stuff. Just a lot of it is don't be afraid to reach out. Worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no, which means you're in the exact same place you're in right now.
That's true.
So, yeah, hope that helps.
It does. That's been a lot of my experience whenever you said, like, what have you done and everything. I've done a lot of things and then I get really discouraged from them and stop it.
And that's very normal. I get discouraged all the time, which is why I have to retool my expectations.
Yeah.
That's just more of a zooming in, focusing in, making sure, okay, I'm not going 15 steps at a time now I'm down to a quarter inch, back to making normal steps. It's just a lot of retooling. What kind of fandoms are you guys into? I'm gonna start in the front.
I am into DC and I'm into a lot of, I read a lot of like fantasy novels.
What kind of authors?
Sarah J. Maas is always a favorite. Anytime I'm in a reading slump, I can turn to her. I'm trying to think. I have so many books on my bookshelves. I have two of them. But Sarah J. Maas is really my favorite right now.
What does I've never heard of her. What does she write? What kind of fantasy?
One of her novels is about like the Fae and the human world colliding. Another is about kind of like a post-apocalyptic world where like angels have come to Earth and decided, you know, like, okay, we're gonna fight everybody. And there's not just them, there's other mythical creatures. There's still Fae in that one too, but it's like all of them are divided into the house of breath and sky, a house of this and that, and you have to really stick with your people and be safe or you're fucked up.
That's cool. Okay, we're gonna go around the room. What kind of fandoms do you go to?
A little bit of everything, really.
Yeah, jack of all trades, my kind of guy. What if you had to pick one? What's one of your favorites?
I'd say it's superhero genre. I'd be
Marvel, DC, indie.
more the DC side.
As long as you stay away from their movies, man, you're good to go. Unless it's an animated movie, in which case.
I like most of their movies.
Oh, well, there's no accounting for taste.
I love DC too.
I love DC. I love their comics and I love their animated films. But God, man, they can't seem to stick the landing on an actual film. Ugh. Although the new Suicide Squad, thank you James Gunn, badass. Miss, what's a fandom you enjoy?
I love Star Wars, Butterfly, Supernatural, anything paranormal.
You know, I've been trying to, I have a couple friends here, because that's what I've learned about Supernatural. If you're into Supernatural, you're into Supernatural. I haven't really come across a casual fan. I've never watched it myself, so I've been trying to reach out to some of my super fan friends because I'm sure there's episode material in there.
There definitely is.
Yeah, I just,
15 seasons worth of episodes on there.
there's so much stuff to watch. All
The
right.
thing is, like, I ran a game and it was like the Supernatural fandom, like so many of them are like women that are like just hot for the characters and they can't talk about anything besides that.
Yeah, I've noticed that. They're like all about them 2 guys or 3 guys. Like, okay. What are you into?
Star Wars and a lot of like paranormal and occult stuff.
Cool. One series I haven't read it. I've heard as good as the Dresden Files if you're into like supernatural. I heard it's like it kind of it's like a merge of I guess the best way I've heard it explained, it's like supernatural meets a fantasy novel. Kind of gets a fantasy novel. It's supposed to be really, really good, but you should look it up. I have a friend of mine, he, one of our Muay Thai coaches, swears by it. Sir?
Dragon Ball, Pokemon, Avatar, huge gamer, anything from the 90s, like, yeah, just huge nostalgia.
So I did an episode of, if you guys have walked around the con, I'm sure you've gone by the booth that sells the Pokeballs. Yes, that's JD. She's a good friend of mine. She actually came on and we did an episode on like cryptids and creatures that inadvertently turned into a Pokemon episode.
Yeah, it's cryptids, creatures, and Charizards.
Yep.
I was scrolling through out in the parking lot earlier.
Yep, yeah, you'll like that one. It was really good. We've
throw that on.
she's come to me. She's got a couple other episodes she wants to do. We're gonna do one on the morality in Jurassic Park. I think she'll be kind of like dissect some of the moral dilemmas within that. And then she wants to do one on psychopop, which I guess has to do with manifestations of death. So it should be really cool. Yeah, and I've got the DBZ one in the works, assuming my buddy ever gets back to me to schedule it.
I mean, if you need an expert.
Hey, shoot me a message, man. I'm always looking. I had this girl, I feel so bad, I still haven't read it. This girl reached out to me and sent me this treatise. She rewrote the story of Final Fantasy VII through like the philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, and I still haven't read it. I've been so busy. I need to read it because I told her if it's good, I want to bring her on the show. So yeah, I mean, as far as stuff I've got in the works, I think I told some of you guys this is a booth. I've got an episode on WandaVision and how our trauma shape our reality. I have an episode I'm going to be doing. Anyone here watch Parks and Recreation? I'm going to do an episode on Jerry Gergich and self-love. Because he's the master of self-love. So I'm going to do an episode on Jerry. I've got an episode on The Purple Man from Jessica Jones, which I imagine most of you haven't watched it. You should definitely watch it. The first season's fucking phenomenal. But anyway, that's going to be an episode on The Purple Man and escaping a manipulative relationship. I've got an episode with a buddy of mine we're going to do on the Green Lantern Corps and using willpower to manifest things in your life. What else do I have up in the docket? That one on Bucky Barnes I'm going to do as a solo episode. There's other stuff. Oh, I want to do more. I did one on Ned Stark and the Blind Side of Honor, which I thought was a fun episode if you guys are Game of Thrones fans. Probably going to do one on Jaime Lannister. I think there's a lot to say about him. I've got other episodes on Star Wars characters in the works, other episodes on Dragonlance characters in the works. I have a couple of ideas for shows, I just haven't locked in a fandom on them yet. If you guys are Magic the Gathering players or have ever played, I had a really fun, I dedicated to my nephew. I got reconnected with my nephew earlier this year, and it turns out he's really into Magic, and I used to be a huge Magic nerd, like, huge fucking nerd. So I only got to see him for one day. We spent the whole day just playing Magic the Gathering and kind of talking how to build decks and stuff, but came up with a really cool idea for an episode on reactive versus proactive thinking. So it's a fun episode, kind of talks about how different, we talked about perspective earlier, but different ways to approach situations in your life with how you control your thinking. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Any sort of feedback from you guys? Could be, you suck! That's cool, I'll take it.
Very relatable.
That's what I'm aiming for.
That's key.
Yeah, and I'm very open about everything. That's just who I am. I don't know, broadcast it to the world. I just think there's too many of us out there who are experiencing similar things, but none of us have the, I don't want to say the balls, but none of us have, for whatever reasons, we're scared to talk about it. I'm just trying to show people you don't need to be scared. Fuck what the haters think. Be yourself. Enjoy who you are. Anything? Well, honestly, guys, thank you all. So I'm going to sign off as I do my podcast. As always, I'm your host, Tony B, and you be safe out there.